Right. Well, thank you very much for the awesome introduction, Sophie. So I appreciate that. Some really nice words about us in the clan. All right. So this is going to be completely unscripted. I don't have any preset questions. I just want a real intelligent, raw conversation about the world of e-commerce and SEO. So without further ado, on my screen I have Adrien. Right. Where's my? Okay. So Adrien's up here for me, like there. So Adrien, introduce yourself, my man.
Okay, so I'm Adrien Ménard. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Botify. Botify being an organic search marketing platform. So basically, we help large retail websites to increase their traffic and revenue from Google organic results. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you very much. If anyone's wondering why the screen might be a little bit pixelated for Adrien, we're going to put it down to the fact that Botify is doing loads of cool stuff in the background, and that's why. And that's cool. It's excusable. We can live with that. Aleyda, hey, how's it going? It's been a while.
Luke,
yes,
how are you?
I'm really good. I'm really good. How are you? Introduce yourself.
I am an SEO consultant and founder. I have a boutique SEO consultancy called Orainti, and a good share of my clients are websites that not only target international markets, but are also e-commerce driven, transactional websites, a lot of marketplaces, international marketplaces. And so I'm very looking forward to share with you today.
Awesome. Great news. And last but not least, Mr. South of France. G, how's it going? Whereabouts are you? Tell me about yourself.
Well, yeah, for sure, Luke. So I'm Guillaume Cabane. Everybody calls me G. Too complicated name. And I'm a growth advisor to mostly MarTech startups, B2B SaaS businesses. And today I'm going to be representing one of those, which is Gorgias, which is one of the top e-commerce help desks in the world. And with a couple of thousand of clients, we have a pretty good perspective on, what happened in 2020 and how e-commerce merchants are preparing for the months to come.
Fantastic. I love that. I love that. And last but not least, for anyone who's wondering what the heck I'm doing here, my name is Luke Carthy, and I am also in the world of growth like G, but I specialize in e-commerce growth in that capacity. So, G, I'm going to use your image behind you as a wallpaper as a perfect example to kick off some conversation. So, I think anyone, unless you've been living under a rock or you're off the grid, that is a very clear trajectory for e-commerce growth over the last 6-ish months, right? Since COVID really kicked off. Exactly. G has got it going on. So,
Luke, where are we right now? Are we here? Or are we here? Or are we here?
I reckon we're.
Are we flattening? Or are we about to grow?
Yeah, I reckon we're still growing. We're not done yet. We're still growing. But a question I'd just love to put out there to kind of get things started is, what has been your first-hand experience of, we'll call it the e-commerce re-revolution, if you like, since COVID? What things have you really seen that have accelerated and gone completely off the scale in your own, perspective? So we'll keep the order the same. Adrien, I'll let you kick it off, my man.
Yeah, okay, cool. Thank you. So I would say two major things. First, the search intents dramatically changed overnight. That was incredible, to look at how quickly the user behavior, the user search intents change. And the one thing that really fascinated me, because we are lucky enough to have global retail customers over the world, so we can access to their queries for every market. And so it all started, as we know, with APAC. And then it moved to Europe and finally to North America. I thought it was very, very interesting to see how quickly everybody changed the way we were purchasing online. The second thing is more on the retail side. I was amazed by the flexibility and the reactivity of our customers, on how quickly they adopted to this new search intent from their customers, and how quickly they adopted some automation features that we can have on with our product.
Okay, awesome. I love that. I love that. I
Cool.
think that's brilliant. I think one perfect example of exactly that kind of quick, immediate change is what Heinz did. I'm not too sure if it's a global site or one that's just for the UK, but Heinz like knocked up a real quick e-commerce site on Shopify, and literally within a couple of weeks was selling direct to consumer. And that is, I guess, a perfect example of exactly what you're talking about. So brilliant. I'll extend the conversation and the question out to yourself later. So what have you seen in that same space of growth?
I am going to take one of the comments from Adrien before, because I this is very aligned to what I have seen, of course, especially for e-commerce websites that or marketplaces that all of a sudden started to sell masks, right? Because supply and demand, right? Marketplaces that were this it was not even a category before, right? Or it was like a third level facet, and nowadays is one of the top categories, driving much more conversions, right? So I have been able to see how proactive across many verticals websites have been to identify new consumer type of behavior, to identify and enable also and different areas of their website in order to be there to make those levels or areas of the website rankable and attract and be able to profit and leverage that opportunity right there. On the other hand, also many players who I will say didn't consider necessarily before international markets have started to also start to take that those markets much more into consideration when they have realized that many of the new orders, the new behavior, the new intent is coming from abroad, right? And they do have the capacity to generate like non-trivial share of sales, right? So I have seen many clients wanting to start targeting many more European markets, wanted to also start trying much more a few Latin American markets too, even like emerging markets too. So it has been quite fun to see the type of reaction on leveraging new opportunities on one hand, and then also be there for their customers. I have also seen a lot of e-commerce websites start to considering and investing much more in informational content, in FAQs, in Q&As, especially with new customers that they all of a sudden had that were not necessarily used to the way of how they work, right? And to be there to connect with their customers in many other ways than just the transactional approach too.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, and I can resonate that 150%. That's brilliant. I think what's amazing is as SEOs and as content marketers and as industry leaders, this is the sort of stuff we dream of. We ask for it all the time. You know, content strategy, proper funnel assessment, a whole, growth funnel from discovery right the way through to purchase. And all of a sudden COVID happened, which of course is a bit of not a bit, it's a major disaster. But there is definitely some good things that we've seen out of it in terms of companies being forced to invest money into e-commerce because there's no other, sales channels. So yeah, that's a brilliant bit of insight there. So G, over to yourself. I always say the name G now with such vigor and intent in my voice. So I'm loving the name. But yeah, tell me what you. It works. What have you seen?
Good marketing. So with Gorgias, like a couple of thousands of merchant brands, and added on top of that many thousand more since the beginning of COVID. And there's a couple of large market moves that I saw that are interesting if you take a step back and you're a bit macro. One obviously is that there's a lot of people who unfortunately got laid off, and a non-significant portion of those actually started some e-commerce sites as a source of revenue. And we saw a lot of those people simply go to Shopify and other of those easy to build e-commerce website platforms and just start a business. And some of those are working out great for them. That's also creating increased competition in the categories they're entering. And those people have, a lot of energy, and so they're creating a lot of content. So that's one interesting market move. And the second interesting market move I saw is the penetration of e-commerce, especially in the US, which has increased in a way that we hadn't seen before. E-commerce was, I'd say, increasing its share of market penetration of a couple of percent per year, depending on the category. It's a slow migration, and you can see some categories which had capped out, like books, for example, right? People who want to buy books online have, and those who don't want don't, right? And with the lockdown, that has changed a lot, and so now a lot of people who didn't want to buy online have been forced to buy online, and some of them liked that experience. And that has been a unique opportunity for brands to create a brand affinity loyalty with those new customers and consumers in a way that they would never have been able to reach those people. And so there's, again, if we take the SEO angle, there's interesting, I'd say the smart brands, the smart merchants have created tailored content to cater to those new populations. And so for me, the keyword here in both cases is speed. The people I have seen succeed were those who saw those market moves early, and like early in March said, yes, let's go create content for those new populations. Let's go create this new market segment. Let's go after that. And they were the first ones to market, and they were able to capture all those searches, and they got the revenue. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. All rings true. And it's all really positive news, which is good. Starting the conversation on a positive win, but to kind of change the tone of the conversation a little bit. We all know that COVID and everything else, with good, there's bad, there's yin and there's yang, right? So what kind of things have you seen, again, in the e-commerce space across this year that haven't been so great? Where have you seen challenges and pain points and friction and downturns? Let's talk about some of the raw stuff that maybe some of the listeners can tap into and take some advice from. So again, with yourself, Adrien, we'll start from the top.
So I'm thinking about the travel industry, of course. So once again, the users' behavior changed because they were not actively looking for new travels, but they were actually looking for being reimbursed of the travel they already paid. And I thought it was, so I'm traveling all the time. I love visiting new countries. And for me, seeing an industry like the one, like this one, impacted this way was really something that I didn't like. So it looks like it's getting better. It's not going back to normal, of course, and I'm not even sure it's gonna back to normal in the next 6 months. But yes, this is definitely something that I'm going to remember, and I'm thinking about all my customers because they represent maybe 20% of the revenue. So we made everything possible to adapt our commercial strategy and relationship with them to make sure that they can go through the storm.
I like that. Yeah, travel is definitely a big pain point. So Aleyda, you're nodding in huge agreement right now. So I'm going to let you go. Let me hear what you got to say.
Yes, indeed. I agree that, for example, indeed, we don't think of travel as e-commerce, but it's very transactional driven. Yes, and the huge aggregators, marketplaces, etc. And I have to say, the purely e-commerce type of clients that I work with, thankfully, they haven't been necessarily negatively affected. Of course, they may have had a few extra challenges than before. So, for example, with inventory, right, that has been a little bit more chaotic and different than before. So in some cases, I have seen marketplaces finally willing to shift the way they handle product pages, product URLs, because if you start selling masks, they will be gone in 5 seconds. So stop completely indexing those URLs and at some point aggregating them in a aggregator product type that they enable even for that, right? For that crazy, always changing inventory. That was mind blowing to see. But not necessarily that bad, because yes, they have been in the good side of those industries that have been benefited in general by this craziness. On the other hand, yes, with cruise lines, oh my God, transportation platforms like, for example, car rental alternatives, car rental alternates. So, for example, they were highly hit at the start, but these have been, for example, it has been not necessarily as damaged or negatively hit as others. So, for example, I have seen already that they started to grow again at the end of May, beginning of June. In July, they were already pre-COVID levels, more or less. So we can see that there are different levels of those type of transactional companies that have been hit. I have to say though that the e-commerce ones that thankfully that I am working with have been in the good side of the street though. Yeah.
That's good news. That's good news for everybody, right? Good news for you, good news for your clients and everything else. So that's great. But yeah, travel definitely been hard in a number of ways. And I love the fact that you bring up car hire as well and vehicle hire, because I remember, I don't know if this was specific again to the UK or a global issue, but when it was, I've never seen this before in my life, and I don't think I'll ever see it again, is when oil got so low in cost that it was actually the oil refineries were actually in debt. They wanted to give oil back to make their money, which is just unreal. It just really shows, obviously e-commerce, getting things delivered to your door, people not traveling, and how it all connects together, right? Less travel means more e-commerce, and maybe in the future, maybe there's some real clever data analysts, maybe guys at Botify can almost like track oil price and see if there's an increase in e-commerce demand as a result, right? Because the two are kind of interlinked, transport and but anyway, I'm going off on like a completely different tangent here. So if anyone's in the modern data, maybe take a look at that. Last but not least, again, G, what are you seeing? What are the negative things that you're seeing impacted right now?
Yeah, not sure it's negative, but it's challenging for sure. Has been how merchants are able to find customers, new customers. I was talking earlier of increased competition, and that's definitely something I've been seeing this year. The number of channels that are available to find customers has been reduced, depending on like what was your distribution method. But if you're thinking of like some retailers had, a mix of online and offline channels. Some of them find customers at, in-person exhibits, showrooms, and stuff like that, and then the sales move online. Well, that no longer happens nowadays, right? The second thing that we saw on the paid side, on the CPC side, we saw significant, let's say, drop in CPCs like in March as everybody pulled back to like, oh, wait, what's happening? Let's stop investments. And then they skyrocketed back, right, in like May and June, as everybody just moved massively their offline budget to online. And this is, again, like I used to be in San Francisco up to recently, like this is not going to be improved by like the American election, moving online to Facebook and like those budgets going. And so what's going to happen is that you have, at say, Facebook becoming like extremely costly because everybody's moving the budgets there, and the number of consumers hasn't changed, right? So you're just bidding on the same people. And so you just have a few channels. And so that is, I think, the challenge that we're looking at solving is how do you connect with current and future customers in a world where like you only have online, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, I kind of want to give a shout out to a gentleman called Arnout Helmans. And the reason why I say that is because he put out a tweet earlier this week, I think, or last week, about how we are underinvesting in Bing ads because people are at home and people have their work computers, and a lot of work computers are defaulted to Bing search engine. And just, again, sensing out opportunities and using behaviors and kind of understanding where your customers really are at and adapting platforms. I think as SEOs, myself included, I'm mad guilty for this, is just simply focusing on the 90%, right? Focusing on the Google market share and forgetting about everybody else. I mean, is Ask Jeeves still a thing? I don't know. But you hear my point. So awesome. Let's move on the conversation. So I guess with the world of e-com, the way it's going and everything growing at 100 miles an hour, and it doesn't look like it's going to be slowing down anytime soon. It could be an intimidating space to get into for small businesses, for startups, for that kind of institution and setup. So what kind of piece of advice would you give to a startup who maybe is within their first 12 months of trading online? How can they go toe to toe with some of the big players in this space? So we'll turn it around this time. G, I'm going to start with you.
What kind of startup? A e-commerce merchant or an e-commerce martech?
All right, let's have both. Let's have both. I would say I was thinking merchant specifically, but if you got something else for martech, let's hear it.
Yeah, so on the merchant side, I'd say there are a lot of sub-market niches that are appearing more and more these days within the populations, and so being able to be really good on a small niche and finding this like what we call like the product to channel fit. We often, in the MarTech side, we often, in the B2B SaaS where I live, we talk like the product market fit. Is there a fit for your product? Right? And what's interesting is that we now have defined like this kind of circle or quadrant where we think there is actually a fit between your product, and the specific channel, and your product and let's say the specific type of consumer. So it's not who you sell to, it's like where are those people, and can those people be sold to on this channel? So maybe it's going to be like a let's say a subreddit. Maybe it's going to be some population on Quora. And there are many small populations that you can go after, and you got to really, I'd say, nail it there first. The successes I've seen are merchants who are able to create a strong following in a specific category. And we're not going to talk about politics here, but I see in my merchants in the US, people that have created brands that are associated with political parties that have made them successful. There's like Democratic and Republican coffee brands in the US, which just, as a Frenchman, just blows my mind because it's just coffee. But like, it works, right? This is just one thing, it just works, right? And so that is smart, okay? That's just plain smart as a merchant who's trying to find a lower CAC and a better distribution method. And what we call like free acquisition, just to play back to a bit of SEO, right? If you're thinking of like long-term SEO, why we want SEO, it's because the CAC is controlled over time, right? It tends to zero at the infinite, right? And there's a few channels like that, like referral and advocacy and word of mouth, that if played well, have the same, I'd say, benefits. So that is what I'd recommend. Try to build a channel mix that is highly competitive on the CAC side. You do not want to compete with dollars on Facebook. That is a game you will lose. There's always going to be somebody with more dollars than you.
All right, I like that. So yeah, I guess to reiterate that, if you're starting small, if you're new, if you've got a small budget to play with, then as you say, carve out a niche, find your richest, most engaged audience, and kind of build it from there. Yeah. Start small, think big. Love that. Really, really cool. So Aleyda, let's have your advice in this space. So again, just to ask the question. So if you've got a business that's starting up within a year, what kind of advice would you give them to get off the ground?
Yes, I will say that I 100% agree with trying to diversify traffic channels. Of course, that is the healthy thing to do in any case. As an SEO myself, I have to agree, right? You cannot rely, unfortunately, on SEO at the start because it's long term. But because of this, I see too many websites when starting, because they acknowledge that, they are aware of that, they completely forget about SEO, and it's like taxonomy, web structure, everything is a mess at the start because they think it's like, oh, SEO won't pay off on the first months or even years, so I won't pay attention to that. And no, that is a big mistake, because otherwise, later on, they have all the popularity in the world, all of the authority, but they lack a proper structure, consistent facets, categorization that is able to rank for anything competitive, right? So, and a terrible crawlability or indexability because of these issues. So I will say it's important that even if you won't be able to rely on organic search traffic in the first month, that you have a good base, you set a good base, starting, even I have to say, starting with the property, with the domain that you want to start with. I see many European players starting with a ccTLDs without realizing that they could sell abroad rather easily, right? And then they cannot do it if they have a ccTLD, and then they need to enable a new property for that. So it's a waste of effort. So when you start setting your base, start thinking on scalability, start thinking on where you even if you don't have certain category types or product types, how do you set your URL structure and your web structure and internal navigation to be ready for that in the future, to make it scalable on one hand. And then on the other hand, what I have to say, because you cannot think on harvest something that you haven't started to actually prepare way before, right? It's important that you do think on also top of the funnel type of search and searches, informational searches, which will be actually very important for you to establish authority as a brand and to get and increase your link popularity too. So investing a little bit on content marketing and on a good support section, Q&As, implementing structured data, making sure that you have your Google merchant feeds pretty well to leverage that additional visibility that, you know, that nowadays you will be, maybe it's not so big still, but it's upcoming and getting more strength to provide organic visibility in the future too. So I will say set a good base, structured data, good taxonomy, web architecture, and start investing on content, even if it won't pay off maybe in the first year, right? It is going to be there in the long run.
I love all of that, and this is how you know that. Yeah, I'm also I'm an SEO just like Aleyda, right? Like, just so if I had a soundboard, I'd be like hitting all the keys for klaxons and stuff because that's incredible. But yes, just to kind of reiterate exactly what Aleyda said, it's like you need a foundation. You have to start somewhere. You know, you don't have to be comprehensive from an SEO point of view. You haven't got to have all the answers, but yeah, absolutely, taxonomy needs to be the sweet spot. Your SEO foundation needs to be solid, because when you come back in a year or 2 years' time and you want to revisit that and you've got more teams and you've got more complicated e-commerce CMS, it's a real pain to go back to the drawing board and rebuild that. It's a real pain. So yeah, really, really solid advice from Aleyda just there. Awesome. Adrien, let's hear it, man. What advice have you got for starters, people setting up and getting out?
So I actually have an issue, because every time I have a tough question to answer, I'm thinking about what would Aleyda answer. And she just exactly answered what I would have told everyone. So maybe one thing that is very important to remember is that your content, your website, and the technologies you're using are your assets for the long term. And you know, at Botify, we are working with honestly the most powerful retail brands in the world. And even for those brands who are long established, successful websites, the SEO can represent between 15 and 45% of their traffic and revenue acquisition. So what does it mean? It really means that on the long term, if you don't have that, you are going to actually acquire your customers at a price that is probably too high. And I think this is what G was also describing. But a strong foundation of your organic marketing strategy in general will pay off on the mid and long term. And you know, with what we've seen over the past 6 months with this COVID-19 episode, honestly, so we have different bunch of customers, of course. We have customers who have a long time established organic strategy, and we have the others who tend to, let's say, accelerate their digital transformation. And of course, the winners are the ones who have started to invest heavily in their organic marketing strategy sooner than the others. So yes, in short, don't forget to invest heavily in content, in technologies, and in your websites, because these are your true assets for the long term.
Love all of that. This is gold. This is brilliant. Okay. So let's keep the conversation going. So I don't think we could ever talk about e-commerce, SEO, tech stack, channels, acquisition, marketing, retention, whatever you want to call it, without talking about the biggest and probably one of the earliest decisions that brands have to make in the world of e-com, which is, what platform do I go with? What platform do I choose? Now, I know the kind of, you know, there's the household brands, the big names out there. You've got your Shopify, your WooCommerce, your Magento, and then you've got some more sort of tangible ones, your Drupal Commerce and stuff like that. But I just kind of want to pick each of your brains and understand what your personal favorite is. And I know it's a real tough question. It's like trying to ask you to choose between children. But yeah, you know, I'd love to try and get that information from you. So Aleyda, I'm going to start with you. What would be your chosen e-commerce CMS, and give me a reason as to why that is?
Yeah, well, as usual, as a good SEO, it depends, right? And I think that highly in this case, it depends on your capacity to do development, implementations, and changes, and fine tune or personalize whatever platform you choose, right? So if you are an enterprise level type of company already, or you expect to have like a good type of volume going on and do have technical support and development support, I will go, for example, with Magento, because even just with MagiWorks, the one of the most best known extensions right there, you can highly set and configure most of your SEO, technical SEO type of configurations that will highly facilitate. And for the rest, you will have your technical support. On the other hand, if you don't have that type of capacity or budget to do all these changes, but at least have a little bit of technical capacity and a little bit of budget, I will go with WooCommerce. I am a WordPress fan, and also thinking about international, right? Like WPML, Polylang, they do have many different type of extensions, plugins, highly facilitating the whole configuration, one-click installs, etc. So, and give you a good bit of flexibility also in configuration. So that's good. I have to say, though, that I have seen the latest releases announcements from Shopify, for example, supporting multilingual type of configuration with one-click install, one-store install, rather than many, right? So I am seeing that they are making the effort to make it much more straightforward without having to rely on third-party extensions, plugins, whatever. But still, I think that it has still, I would say, too many hassles right at the start, right? If you want to start straightforward, if you want to grow big internationally, right? Maybe this is not what you necessarily need or want. And if you don't have necessarily that type of requirement, it might be good if you're more local oriented, whatever. But if you want to really make the most out of the e-commerce possibilities, going international, global, the two other options, alternatives, I will say are my favorite ones.
Yeah, I love that rundown. I couldn't agree with you more on the WooCommerce side. I'm in a situation of building a brand right now myself, and WooCommerce is absolutely the platform and flavor of choice for all of the reasons and more that you just mentioned. So yeah, happy to hear that. So if anyone's listening, WooCommerce, startup, enterprise, Magento. All right, cool. So Mr. Botify, that's your nickname now. I'm so sorry, but I'd love to hear from someone who kind of crawls so many sites and sees so many tech stacks, and kind of has a really broad perspective of how the internet works, really, in the industry you're in. Yeah, what's your favorite flavor of e-commerce CMS?
So honestly, it's a tough question, because by definition, the customers we are working with most of the time are going to work with a very different platform, on very customized platform. So maybe two things that are going to complete what you just said. The first thing is that, let's face the reality, the choice of a platform most of the time is business driven. Okay, they are not technology driven. So unfortunately, this is the reality of how large organization works. And honestly, I don't think it's gonna change. So maybe the second point is still you have to influence these choices. And I think one thing to consider is definitely the possibility to connect the platform with the other tools or the other third-party data that you want to use to run your strategy. And I think it's also the responsibility, of the vendor to build these partnerships. So, for example, at Botify, we just announced that we had now a strategic partnership with Salesforce Cloud Commerce. This is not the first one. This is not the last one. And we have a team dedicated to work on building those relationships, on building these connectors that are going to make the life of our clients easier. So I really recommend to take these partnerships into consideration when you are establishing an agreement with a platform.
Awesome. So I guess before we get to yourself, G, just want to give an opportunity to talk about the one-to-one live rooms that are going on with Botify at the moment. So if you want to pick their brains, get to know more about the tool, maybe ask them some questions about e-commerce and what platforms to choose, or maybe get a more rounded answer on some of the things we've spoken about today, then reach out, make sure you go check out their live rooms. So on to yourself, G. What's your favorite flavor of e-commerce CMS?
I'll tell you the how I pick first, and then I'll tell you the answer. The how I pick is changing during migration is painful, so I want to avoid that. It's very costly. So I want to make a bet that is safe on the long term, and I'm thinking like 5 years horizon. Okay, and two, what can force me into migration? Migration can be caused by a platform no longer being supported, no longer being updated, or a small vendor being acquired and being integrated into a larger suite, which I don't want to be a part of. Which means I'm looking for a strong, solid, established company that has none of those risks from the business side. And from what I'm seeing, the best bet, if you want to minimize risk, is Shopify. So that's where I put my bets, and that's where I see most of the growth happening in the US market. Almost all of the growth, like SMB mid-market merchants, is in Shopify. The enterprise is in like Salesforce Commerce, for sure, the true enterprise, and all the rest is migrating to Shopify. Just the scale of the growth of Shopify in number of merchants, it's astounding, really astounding, right? Which is reflected in their market cap. But that's clearly, I'd say for me, the safest choice if you want to avoid platform migration over the next 5, maybe 10 years.
That's a really cool way of looking at it, actually. I guess it really boils down to, again, it's a horrible phrase to use, and we overuse it in SEO all of the damn time, but it really does depend. But I think that the reason why I wanted to ask that question is because there's never one solid answer. There's never one consistent answer. And, we'd ask that question again in 6 months, maybe even sooner than that if a massive technological change happens, and our answers could be different. But I think it's just identifying what it is your business needs. I really like the way G approaches it in maybe looking at the way your business operates and understanding what your risks are and minimizing those and costs, and then taking a decision from there. I think Shopify has nailed it on the fact that they've offered a really low barrier of entry. It's almost like it's practically as easy as listing something on eBay for sale. And that to a lot of people is really sexy because you haven't got to think about the technology. And it's nice and simple.
I will just counterbalance what I said with something exactly almost the opposite, which is if you're starting an e-commerce store and you're thinking of your presence, you've got to differentiate. And there's 2 ways to differentiate. Either your product is differentiated or your marketing approach, which means in our day and age, the website is differentiated, right? Your distribution and marketing approach. Now, if you have a great differentiated product that is appealing to a customer base, then Shopify is great, right? Because it's a solid and you can't really go wrong, right? It's going to work. I mean, there's no doubt Shopify is going to work. Now, if you have a product that is not differentiated, that exists elsewhere, other people are like selling, and you want to compete on SEO or other channels, and you got to really like milk it out and like squeeze the extra drop of performance, then you won't be able to do that with Shopify because you can't, it's not customizable to that end, right? And so that's how I would judge, right? If you look at if I'm starting, is my product differentiated, or is going to be my distribution and content that's differentiated? That's probably how I would pick.
All right, G, I think that sounds like an awesome, like a flow diagram to making a choice as to which CMS. So I kind of want to see that content coming out pretty soon, right? Just like the awesome G flow chart of how to choose the ultimate CMS. That's awesome. Well, I have literally lost track of time. I don't know how much time we have, but I'm going to go away and ask another question. And the last question I want to ask, I guess, is what is one of the biggest mistakes you see in e-commerce that so many companies make again and again? Like the ones that are just painful because you see them everywhere. And again, Adrien, let's start with yourself. So yeah, big mistake that you see time and time again in the world of SEO, whether it's world of e-commerce.
So I would say actually two mistakes. The first one is that brands don't understand that organic search is a process. You have to get your pages crawlable, you want your pages to be in the index, you want them to be ranked, then you want them to convert. So, and I think if you don't think this way, you are not going to be able to define a strategy for each point or each step of this critical process. Maybe the second mistake that I'm seeing too often is actually a mistake related to the organization of search marketing. On the most successful brands with SEO these days, from my perspective, and we'll see if Aleyda agrees, but are the brands that put SEO under the web product management. What does it mean? It means that there is no change published or released on a website that have not been approved before by the SEO product team. And honestly, I think it guarantees that no disasters happen on the website. So at least your foundations are there to last on the long term, and you can focus on your content strategy, on your tactics to benefit from the seasonality or the changes in the search trends that you can track now easily with the modern tools that any SEO teams should have.
All
so
right,
that's it. Do you agree, Aleyda?
I do agree. In fact, I don't know if, well, probably you haven't seen, but I actually published a post like a couple of months ago about how to align SEO in the product triangle. And with every age of the product triangle, one of the ages is growth, where SEO is. On the other are the functionalities of the products, pretty much tied with the tech, and then the sales of the products, the conversion, the money making part of the product, and how you need to align every age of it in order to make it the product feasible from a business perspective, which at the end of the day is what we need to play with. It's like, I mean, when we start doing SEO, it's not for the sake of checking all the check boxes saying that the website is perfectly optimized. It's because it needs to be aligned with a business goal on achieving certain type of objective that will make the company profitable. And yes, indeed, it needs to be aligned with products, updates and functionalities. It needs to be aligned also on marketing campaigns, seasonality, connecting with audience behavior. So yes, I see that it needs to be very ingrained, and 100% I see that in most cases we don't forget about the marketing side of things, so how aligned needs to be with marketing, but also with product to make it something core. And this is how we also avoid the products of, oh, someone changed my canonical tags or my hreflang annotation. I didn't notice. Nobody told me. This type of things, right?
Absolutely. I think that's normally, I don't know if you'd agree with me on this, but normally what solidifies those three edges, I like that triangle, is a really solid...
does the blog post, Aleyda. We want
Sorry?
to read your blog post, Aleyda.
I will definitely... I will definitely send to you product triangle SEO, and you will find it. Integrating the SEO within the product triangle. Yeah.
All right. I like it. I'll be looking out for it.
Yes.
And yeah,
so,
G.
Yeah, sorry. I do actually have my own, I will say challenges that sorry, look, I was so excited when you asked for challenges, and I already wrote them. I need to get them out of my chest to make me feel better. Don't make me think about issues without actually complaining about them, right? So the first thing, and then again and again, somehow, e-commerce websites indexing their internal search results. I mean, why still today? Like, you don't have a proper taxonomy, categorization, facets, targeting these queries anyway. Why you don't tie or connect together your internal search results to refer the user directly towards them, right? So too many websites still indexing their internal search results or trying to use their internal search as a proper navigation system or browsing system. So no. Yeah, indeed. Then second, I hate this approach of rule of thumbs saying something like, oh, everything after the second level category or second level facet is no index or is canonicalized to the parent category, right? No, this needs to be flexible, and it's about supply and demand at the end of the day, right? And so you need to make a proper keyword research and understand if there is a product model whose color is highly searched and very popular. For example, black Yeezy shoes. Sorry, but you will need to index that second level facet color page, because otherwise you will be leaving a lot of money on the table if you don't, right? And then, of course, properly optimize it, properly internal link to it, etc. Then the third and last one will be that a lot of people still have a hard time in e-commerce on how to optimize the category pages and integrate content without losing the transactional or commercial type of intent, because they realize that in order to be able to rank for certain queries that are clearly not informational, transactional, the point is that the competitors are ranking them are more relevant, have more content, have more offering, and they try to force things by featuring a guide about the history of the iPhone in the iPhone category that has nothing to do, and it's not the proper content to go there, right? So open your mind as a marketer, as a salesperson, and the role of that page is to be of that salesperson, mid of the funnel, describing the choices that you have at that level of your shop, describing them, pros and cons, different alternatives. So it is possible to integrate content very well that is connected with the commercial nature, that doesn't challenge or negatively influence the conversion of those type of pages, and you can test this too. And so I will highly incentivize to content people and SEOs also to open your minds more towards that, right?
So maybe I can complete what Aleyda just said, because what you're telling us is that we should all have a data-driven approach to understand how people are searching, what are the pages that are related to the queries that are being searched, etc., etc. So maybe one KPI or two KPIs that can share with you that come directly from the Botify customers database. So at Botify, we have the capacity to track the indexation of pages of our customers. And on average, I can tell you that 50% of the pages of a website are not even crawled by Google. So it means that some of the pages are not in the index. For some pages, we are very happy not to see them indexed, but for others, like the product pages or the category pages, of course, if they are on your website, it's probably because you want to sell the product that are listed, and probably because people are searching for them. And for those strategic product categories, I can tell you that I would say on average, maybe 20-25% of those pages are not crawled within the last month. So not crawled means not discovered by Google and very unlikely to be indexed in the end. So that's a big mistake. If you have the inventory of relevant content, of course, make sure that this content is crawled and refreshed by Google regularly.
I like that. See, real live insight. You see that? That's awesome. You didn't get that anywhere else. All right, cool. G, last but not least, man, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
I think for me, you gotta look at the customer experience you're creating. You know, I started my career, I'm afraid to say, almost 20 years ago at Apple. And I learned a lot about how to create this unique customer experience, right? And when you're trying to create a loyalty, which is, the end goal of like a merchant and a brand, because we all know that repeat return dollars are much cheaper to acquire than net new dollars, right? You got to think whether your channel is SEO, whether it's paid or any other channel, like what's the experience that you're creating? And is this a good experience? Can you improve it? And how does SEO integrate within a larger channel mix, right? Do you have a comprehensive strategy where if the person is acquired through SEO or from somewhere else, then there is a follow-on strategy that will happen when that person eventually leaves your site, because that will happen to 100% of your audience, right? To bring them back and back again, all right? How do you think through that? How is the content that you work through all of the channels, paid and non-paid, coherent, right, together? And most of the time, when I do advisory and I look into, let's say, the acquisition mix, I see incoherent messaging that is being pushed across multiple channels, right? Somebody comes for a specific vertical, and that vertical, there's no deep linking. And there is the emails that are being sent on to that audience do not mention that vertical of products, and same for the ads. And so that is a destruction of value, and it's a destruction of customer experience. So you really want to create an awesome customer experience that makes the people want to come back because they were delighted by what they saw on your site.
Love that. I love that. It's all really, really powerful stuff. So I think we're kind of out of time, but there's one thing I'd love to kind of throw in as a last tip, and that's non-commerce or non-product centric search queries. And we're about to see it again with, well, we've seen it again already with COVID, but we're about to see it again with the rise of Black Friday, which is coming real soon. So a lot of people go to sites, they search for COVID to see if you're still open, if you're practicing social distancing, if you're all about it or you've been ignorant to it. But think about people who are going to go to your site and actually search for Black Friday deals on the site search. And there are so many brands. Homebase, yes, you. There's been loads of brands in this particular space where if you search for Black Friday, you get no results found because there's no products called Black Friday, but it's very much an important site search query. So make sure you are optimizing for things like returns policy, customer service, phone number, returns address. They're not product centric, but they are queries that people must care about, and you need to provide an experience for those. So I think we're at time.
And a Black Friday landing page that doesn't change from year to year, please.
Yes. Mic drop. Just. All right, awesome. Listen, I've had so much fun with you guys. Thank you so much for bringing me on this. It's been a great conversation. Lots of really juicy advice and tips and support across e-commerce and SEO and choosing a CMS. It's been awesome. So yeah, Aleyda, G, Adrien, it's been brilliant. It's been an event. So thanks for joining me on this. Lengow Day. It's been fun.
Thanks everyone for coming. Thanks, good sir. Thanks, Luke.
Bye.